go next. Hi everyone, my name is Lean. So I've been tutoring, I think a student who was referred to us by you, Renee. Her name is Fatima. So it has been a very interesting journey, I would say, so far in the last month. So she is a Syrian immigrant, and she has been living in Charleston for 4 years now, and for the most part doesn't really interact with anyone besides her family. So she speaks Arabic and almost entirely no English or any kind of exposure to English alphabet. And I think the highest level of education that she's had in her life was 6th grade. So, and she's 74. And so my approach this past month to teaching her, and we've been meeting Mondays and Wednesdays for 40 minutes, but I found the best maybe pick up sentences in case she's in an emergency, but then I would translate, or I would transcribe, I guess, the sentences in English using Arabic alphabet. That's been the only way that I've been able to get her to pick up the material, both in terms of phonetics, how to pronounce, but also to remember the meaning. And so far, I think we've gone through 11 lessons. I think in each lesson, we try to learn between 3 to 4 sentences and try to review them. And I've been recording every conversation, every like Zoom meeting we have, and then send her the recording for each sentence so that she can practice on her own time. And it's been a hit or miss, mostly because like she tends to forget things, even though we keep repeating them, but I think it's just it's maybe, I think, a little harder for her to remember things. And so yesterday we actually had our session where we were reviewing things from the beginning, and and I noticed that towards the end, I noticed that she was looking at a cheat sheet, which wasn't really funny. But I was also like, oh, actually, for me, I thought, like, actually, maybe let's do that method, because maybe it'll help her also like the material beyond just like hearing me say it and then repeating after me. Like if she's writing it herself afterwards and like using it as a cheat sheet afterwards, maybe it might work. So it's been interesting. But I think little by little we're making some progress. She is able to like memorize some sentences and like be able to understand the meaning behind each sentence. So yeah.
You sound like the perfect tutor for her, because since she's been in our program, she's shown a lot of hesitancy to learn even just about American culture. And it's been because she's not able to communicate, and we don't have any Arabic speakers, so we speak to her through her son. And so I think that this is like a beautiful relationship that she will be able to have with you, where it can be a one-on-one relationship where you're able to cut out the translator, and she can really grow to trust you. And I think it's wonderful. I'm so glad that you guys got connected.
Yeah, I'm glad we got connected too. I think at some point I would like to also expose her to, American culture and things like that. I think my goal has been so far to get her to summon up the courage to say hello to neighbors if she sees them, and sort of maybe start conversations, even though likely it'll be a while before she can have a back and forth banter, but at least it's, it's a start. So, but if anyone has any tips also, if any of you have had experience working with students who essentially started with absolutely no exposure to English, I'd love to hear your input on how to approach this.
Susan, you're on mute.
Susan, you must
hear you, Susan.
Muted. Sorry about that. Thank you. I was going to say, why don't we kind of quickly go around and then we can connect like Lena and Renee, and we can, what we want to do is send out emails so y'all can connect with each other and we can share some tips and more in-depth ideas. But we want to make sure that we can get Renee to talk to us about her expertise on citizenship and some of the other issues that we're dealing with the ESL students. I do not have an ESL student. I'm, as you know, the matcher. I've always had basic literacy students. Melissa, why don't you go ahead?
You mean me?
Oh, sure. Well, I was going to say Melissa Homan, but it can either be Melinda or Melissa.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there was somebody on here named Melissa.
Well, she has a name up that says George, but that's her husband.
That's because it's his computer.
Well, Melissa, why don't you go ahead?
So I have a family. I have a husband and a wife who are from Colombia. Their daughter is going back to school and college, and she has been their interpreter for 6 years in the States. He works here. They're very bright. They're very knowledgeable about Colombia, and they do travel in the United States. The issue is conversation with other Americans. So we've been working on, just general conversation, and the grocery store is the biggest topic. That's because she does it and she speaks very little English, whereas her husband, works in Gestalt. So he has a lot of interaction with Americans. So we've been working on that. But a lot of times she slips into the Spanish and I'm kind of like, Pat, well, I don't speak Spanish. But it's been kind of interesting. The goal for the daughter who's 25 wants to have her own life. But right now she's her parents' interpreters. So we're trying to get them to feel comfortable with going out and doing things. But the daughter is a heavily used interpreter at all times. But I've seen a growth in just interaction. I know, Lean, I understand your dilemma, but I have found I just take little pieces. So funny story, I have used a book. I've ordered it online. I am using ESL library now, but I found that in the book, they didn't know currency. Well, that's because they use credit card when they go to the grocery store. So it's those little things you learn when you're tutoring. Wow. So, currency isn't a high priority. She wants to know, how do I ask where something is? And so we've gone through the ESL library on basic grocery shopping to learn how to ask simple questions. And that's helped a lot. I've also taken her around her neighborhood. You want her to meet the neighbors. So what I've done is taken her around her own neighborhood. We read signs because they didn't know that the sign was telling them, don't turn to the left. And I said, well, if you turn to the left and the police stop you, you'll know why. So I think with English, as a second language, and Bill's been in it for a long time. I've been basic. This is my first time having English as a second language students. I'm finding it, I love culture and I love history and I love traveling. So this family is just real dynamite to work with. But I find that getting them to feel comfortable in their neighborhood, they get to see neighbors when they're out and interact. So that's been a real big help for us. And I've also introduced my husband to them because it gives some interaction to the male so that they can talk about male things and not just what the female wants to go shopping, because he doesn't go shopping at all. It's always her. So I've kind of learned to interact different times in different ways. We've gone out to eat, so they learn how to ask for things. So I think mixing up the bag of what they want to do is very helpful. Now Melinda might want to say something.
Okay, I'll go next. I have a student that's assigned to me. He is not really a basic literacy or an ESL student because his English, while he comes from Uganda, is actually pretty good. But he is interested in taking his citizenship test. And we had our first meeting scheduled on Monday and had technology problems. And so we're gonna try again. So that's, I'm still at the very beginning of that, but I'm really interested to hear what Renee has to say, because I want to learn more about how, what he's needing to go through as he seeks to get citizenship.
Barbara?
I've been working with the same lady since February of last year, and it's been a wonderful experience, I think, for both of us. She's from Argentina, and she is very well versed in speaking English, but she has trouble sometimes with the vocabulary. I also use the ESL library, and we do a lot of reading, and then we go over the words and questions back and forth. And some of the things that she knows surprises me, and then other things that I feel like are so simple are harder for her. So those are the two things we've worked on the most. And, you know, I don't know about their citizenship. I know they've been here, she and her husband, for a couple of years, and I think she's planning to go back to Argentina at some point in time, but I don't think she knows, nor her husband, how long they will be here. So that's an interesting question I'm going to have for her when I talk with her next week. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me as well as for her, and I've really enjoyed learning from her, and I think she enjoys the lessons as well, because I'm trying to find something that's challenging for her so she doesn't feel like it's, you know, something that she's not gaining information from.
Amy? Hi, Amy.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
It's okay. We're just sort of talking about our students very briefly and what we're doing.
Okay, my student is also from Uganda, and they take, because Uganda is a British member of the British Commonwealth, they actually take English 1st through 12th grade. And my student is a high school graduate. So he, I think his English is pretty good. We have been working on sight words, and we went through a list of the sight words, and he did really well on those. There are some of the pronunciations that throw him off a little bit. He has sometimes, depending on where the letter L shows up in a word, he'll pronounce it as though it's an R. And then the actual letter R. Susan, I was telling him that you had asked me if he spoke with a British accent, English with a British accent. And he asked me a question about how you pronounce the word birth, B-I-R-T-H, because when in his job, he has to ask people what their birth date is.
Ah.
And when he says it, it sounds like Beth. I mean, I thought about this last night because I kept trying to think, how do you explain the accent? But you know how people in Boston don't necessarily pronounce those R's? I mean, Harvard. That's kind of what, that's probably the closest to what his accent is. But he wants to, right now we are starting on the driver's license handbook, he wants to get his West Virginia driver's license so that he can get a car. And he's already pretty close. I mean, the last time that he took it, he got 17 right. You have to have 19 right. But we're going to go through the handbook. And I told him, I'm sure this will be a good reminder for me too, because it's like, you know, only been a few years since I took driver's ed.
Right.
So we're going to start on that tomorrow. Sometimes we have had our technology challenges, usually because of me and Zoom. And like last week, he got the opportunity to pick up an extra shift on one of the days that we usually work. And so we just doubled up on Friday, which meant instead of starting at 4 o'clock, we started at 2 o'clock. Well, when I sent out the Zoom for yesterday, it went out for 2 o'clock and I was outside in the yard working. So when I came back in, I'm like, okay, well, John, sorry about that. And we've had a couple of times where he has missed, but I think we're in a pretty good rhythm. He is eager. I think he also wants to pass the citizenship test. He's very interested in American politics, and he worked security at the U.S. Embassy in Kampala. So he's very interested in U.S. politics and interested, but not quite as much about West Virginia politics. So there's always a lot to talk about there.
Sounds like you have quite a bit to work on. It sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, he is eager. He has, I think I told you, he has a 6-year-old son. He wants to get his son over here. I didn't ask about mom because I figured he only said son.
Leave that one alone.
Leave that one alone. Just went right on by.
Bill Hutchinson, why don't you talk about, you've got what, 3 students right now?
By the way, the TH problem is very, very common. And I first came across it with my Chinese students, where particularly the girls always said any word with a TH in it with their hand over their mouth like this, because they were ashamed of showing their tongue. Oh. And if you have the TH with this, that, these, those, the tongue has to come out a little bit. And they were very embarrassed by that. I'm meeting my students at First Presbyterian Church, and I meet them all twice a week. And this morning, my first group were a man and his wife from Iran, and he has Parkinson's disease. So it's very, very difficult for him to, to speak clearly. And so we work very, very slowly on this. He reads quite well, but he doesn't know his numbers very well. He doesn't know the days of the week in order or the months of the year. And so we're drilling on that a little bit. His wife is a blessing because she is better at English than he is. And she's very good at translating to him and very patient with him. And that's a real blessing. So they're both doing very, very well. I've had them both for, I think this is my 3rd year with them. My other student currently is from Syria, and I've had him for about 7 years. And we spend a lot of time just talking. And he will bring in things like letters that he doesn't understand that he's getting in the mail. Today he received a telephone call he couldn't understand. So he put it on speaker. And it was about getting his car back to a dealership so that they could take care of a problem that he was having with the car. This coming month, I have another student who's returning from Syria, who his English is really pretty good, and he owns several schools in Damascus. So I would say that students are doing pretty darn well. And I learned so much from them because I learned all about the country, the politics, their families, the fears that they have, and they're just a joy to have. I'll cease there.
Jack McGann? Jack, you're muted. Jack, you're muted. There you go. Jack's our math professor as well as a GED teacher.
I put the camera off because I was eating my supper. I have two students who I've had for quite a while. One is a Syrian man, about 70 something, and he speaks English. Well, he understands English and speaks English, but he's trying to improve his English speaking. And so we were doing a lot of reading. We were reading in a book called The History of the Arabic Peoples. But the language in a lot of the books is very difficult. He's read a lot of, for example, Lord Byron's poetry. Some of the poetry he knows by heart, but a lot of it he's read in Arabic and doesn't read it well in English. And so we were reading the poetry, but it's such an outdated part of the language. And it has huge words in it, and lots of little phrases that are stuck in between things, so that it's really hard to interpret. And so lately we've been reading Time magazine. I got a subscription to Time magazine, and even it has lots of words that he doesn't know. But what I'm working on now is I'll get him to read a sentence or a paragraph and then try to tell me in his own words what it's about, to paraphrase it. And I think that will be the best help for him to develop his confidence in speaking English. He said his sons have told him that his English speaking is much better and he has a lot more confidence than he did before. The other person was educated in India, and she's a working woman with children and a husband. She's got a really busy life, and Kathleen Seitz is working with her on all the non-mathematical stuff, and I'm working with her on mathematics, but we had to start out with arithmetic. And we're getting into some of the algebra now, but she still needs a lot of practice with arithmetic. Very difficult. Well, actually, that's not just a problem for foreign people. A lot of American students, high school graduates and college students seem to be very devoid of mathematical or arithmetic facts. You know, when I start working with somebody, one of the first things I do is say, what's 7 times 8? And if they know it's 56, they're way ahead of the game. Because lots of people nowadays seem not to know much about multiplication and division. And I've had students even in college physics classes who don't seem to understand completely the distinction between adding and multiplying. And that's really, we've been working on those basic things as well as learning some of the principles of algebra. But with her, I work probably twice a week for 2 hours. And since her life is so hectic, sometimes, well, she planned to call at 3:30 and she didn't get around to it till 4:15. And then we worked till after 6. With the man that I'm working with, we work about an hour twice a week. So, but he's real happy with that.
Renee, Jack does the math part when we have a GED student, because most of us, if we like to read and we're into reading and writing, a lot of us don't remember our high school math, as Jack says. So most of our tutors are willing to try to help somebody with their GED as long as they don't have to teach math. So Jack is a tremendous help. I'm going to introduce Renee. She's our guest speaker tonight. She's in my screen. She's up in the left-hand corner. Renee Corbett, she is with the Catholic Charities Refugee and Migration Services. She is an outreach worker. They used to be in Charleston. They've given us many students over the years, but they moved to Morgantown, I think about a year ago, give or take. And Renee is in Morgantown. And since we're now, most of us tutoring virtually, we can take students from all over the state. So Renee's been great. She's referred 6 students to us so far. 3 are in Morgantown, 3 are in the Charleston, St. Albans area. So it's been a terrific relationship we've started here about a month or 2 ago. And I asked Renee, particularly since we have a couple people who are going to or want to work on their citizenship, to talk a little about that. It's a difficult process for many students. Unless their English is really good, it's going to be a long process. They're going to have to learn English first. So I thought if she would talk to us a little bit about citizenship and... Well, I don't know what that was. I hope it wasn't me.
No, that was me.
Okay, Renee said to stress she is not a lawyer. They have attorneys who work with the technical legal aspects of this, but she knows the basic ins and outs, and that's what you as tutors will be dealing with. So Renee, take it away.
Hi, y'all. Thank you for letting me join your meeting. It was a pleasure hearing about the different students that you guys have and recognizing that some of them were from our organization too. I thought I would start off just by saying a little bit about what my role is. And then I'll talk about some of the different types of clients that we have, because I think you guys have, like Susan said, you have 6 of them and you'll be likely getting more. And so I think it'll be nice to have a background of where people are coming from, not necessarily what country they're coming from, but kind of their political status, and how that relates to the protections that they have in the United States. Because that can also deal a lot with their mental state and how comfortable they feel here, their eagerness to learn or not to learn English based on some qualifications and requirements that they have to be able to stay in the United States. So we'll get into all of that. Catholic Charities West Virginia is the only refugee resettlement agency in West Virginia. West Virginia as a state resettles a very small number of refugees. We're one of the lowest in the country, unfortunately. One of the reasons for that is for us to be able to accept refugees, and not us as in Catholic Charities, but us as in West Virginia, based on our policy, refugee has to have what is called a U.S. tie living in West Virginia. So that's a family member or a friend, not necessarily only a family member, who is living in West Virginia. And since we are a pretty wide state, you know, there is not that much diversity here. It means that we're not bringing in that much more diversity. So you'll see some other states where it seems like everyone is from all these other countries you hear about in the news are going to other states. And it doesn't really happen in West Virginia because we have to have a family member or a friend living here already. My organization, we help resettle for, I'll call them like types of people, for categories. We use the phrase refugee generally to kind of cover all of them, but that's only one specific category. A refugee is a person who has fled their country for fear of persecution, and they've gone to another country, which typically is a neighboring country. Generally, they've stayed in a refugee camp or like in a town that's near a refugee camp, like if they make enough money, then typically people will not try to stay in the refugee camp. But they'll be living in another country. They'll be staying in a camp run by the United Nations. And then there's a very long process to try to come to the United States. Every year, the US government sets a number of refugees that we are willing to accept from across the world. And the president is the one to make this determination. So during the Obama administration, it became quite high. During the Trump administration, it became the lowest ever. And now during the Biden administration, it's going back up. So that does play into how many people our organization is able to accept. And that's specifically for people who are refugees. So they get approved through the United Nations, and then they get approved through the US State Department. They have background checks, medical clearances, and then they're granted access to come to the United States. So by the time they're coming here, they've generally been outside of their country from anywhere from 2 to 10 years that they've first fled their home. So you'll see a lot of people who are in this scenario are incredibly happy to be here because they have worked for a very long time to come to the United States and to feel stable. Generally, the goal is never for people to be living in refugee camps. Is that like these camps are a place that are either like allowing people to stay safe until they go back to their country or until they get resettled somewhere else. We see that that doesn't necessarily happen, and some people spend their whole lives in refugee camps. But really the goal is to get them to a place that they can feel stable. So our clients who are refugees, so anyone who's coming from Uganda, if you guys have Ugandan clients, they came as refugees, they fled to Kenya, they lived in Kenya for any number of years before coming to the United States. We also help resettle people who are asylees. And I need to make a distinction because we hear on the news about asylum seekers a lot. Asylum seekers are people who are crossing the border, and they have the same fears that those refugees have, fears of persecution for whatever reason. But instead of crossing into a neighboring country and then seeking refuge there, they cross into the United States. Sometimes it's because the United States is that neighboring country, and sometimes it's because it's a country that you're able to get to easily enough, and then you seek asylum. So generally, what happens is a person crosses the border without any sort of paperwork. So it's, you know, they're crossing illegally, but it's not illegal because they're seeking asylum. And the law states that people are allowed to enter the United States and seek asylum. They have 1 year to seek asylum. Once they seek asylum, they will be granted a court date, but it can be quite backlogged. Like we have clients who have court dates in 2026. So that means that they are going to be allowed to be in the United States until their court date, where they don't know if after that time if they will be not granted asylum, which would mean that they would be then going through deportation hearings, or if they will be granted asylum, and at that point they'd be allowed to apply for a green card. So we are only able to work with clients who have been granted asylum. So this isn't on the legal front. On the legal front, we will help people apply for asylum, but on the The social front, so on what I do in helping actually resettle people and make them stable, it's people who have been granted asylum. So oftentimes these are people who have been in the United States for anywhere from a year to multiple years. And generally the people who have crossed the southern border, but I do have some asylum seekers who have flown into the US and then sought asylum and then were granted asylum that way. We also work with victims of human trafficking. So this can be sex or labor trafficking. And I think oftentimes when we think of people who are trafficked, we think of people who have been stolen from their countries and then are brought into the United States, and that's not necessarily the case. It could be people who came here on any number of types of visa and then experienced trafficking while they were in the United States. So we're able to help resettle them. And then the final group of people that we hear about, no one has really, ever heard about this group outside of like our refugee community until recently, and those are the SIV status. So people who have an SIV is a special immigrant visa, and these are people from Iraq or Iran who worked for Iraq or Afghanistan, excuse me, who worked for the US military for at least 1 year. So I'm sure if you guys watch the news or read the news at all, you'll be hearing about SIV because this is a large group of the people who are in some of the different military bases right now are people who are SIV status. And again, so these 4 categories of people, they all have different protections in the United States, different qualifications that affect. Unfortunately, it's not easy, and I'm sure you guys know this with working with your clients. Coming into the United States is generally not easy, and then being able to stay here is also not easy. And it can be a huge stressor for people because you are working to set up your family, you're working to set up a career, you're working to become comfortable, and you don't know if necessarily you'll be able to stay here. And for these 4 categories of people that we work with, it's especially troubling for them because they have already fled their countries for fear of persecution. So it's not like they just came to the United States because they want to get rich. A lot of people do, that like becomes a goal. But the original reason why they left their home country was generally for fear for themselves and for their families. So on the immigration front, when they first come in, generally people come in and they just are granted work authorization. So they don't have a green card yet. They're given work authorization for 2 years. And during that time, they are able to work and they need to pay their taxes. They need to be upstanding, not citizens, but upstanding people in the United States and show that they are doing what they can to help make America better. It's a little silly, but this is like a qualification. For our refugees and our asylees, they are able to apply for a green card after 1 year. So for the refugees, it's 1 year after they've been in the United States. And for the asylees, it's 1 year after they've been granted asylum. So again, for the asylees, these could be people who have been in the United States already for 5 years. Generally, the goal is that they will be granted asylum within 1 year of seeking it, but we see that's not the case with the court backlog. SIVs are granted a green card the moment they enter the United States. So that's a really nice status for them, is the moment they enter, they are given a green card. And then victims of trafficking are generally able to apply for asylum or apply for a green card 3 years after they have been labeled a victim of trafficking. When someone's given a green card, it lasts for 10 years. So you don't need to be able to speak English to get a green card. That's probably that's the main motivator. I think that people will continue to get green cards, and if you want, you are eligible to get a green card every 10 years. You never need to apply for citizenship, and some people don't. And sometimes every 10 years they'll just apply for their next green card. A reason people might not apply for citizenship is 1, they don't speak English. 2, they don't know the process and they think, you know, maybe they haven't been paying their taxes, or maybe they have a ticket once and they don't know how that's going to affect them. Because when you do apply for citizenship, anything related to the police or the courts gets observed. You have to prove that you've paid your taxes for the past 5 years. You need to show that you're like an upstanding citizen, or you have to show upstanding moral character. So if you've had run-ins with the law, some people will like be worried to apply for citizenship for this reason. But generally, after a person has had a green card for 5 years, they're eligible to apply for citizenship. They do not need to be in the United States those full 5 years. I think the qualification is that you needed to be in the United States for at least 30 months in a row at some point, but you are allowed to leave for up to 6 months at a time and then return. So I think a misconception is that people who have their green cards are not allowed to leave the United States. That's not necessarily the case.
One thing I found shocking was the price of getting the monetary price of getting citizenship.
That's a great point, Susan. So the fees to pay to the US government when you apply for citizenship is $1,225. So that's another big reason that people don't apply. And that does not count any sort of lawyer fees. So when you're applying for citizenship or applying for your green card, you're able to do so on your own. You don't need to use a lawyer. My organization, we recommend using a lawyer because you're paying $1,200. You really don't want to mess up your application. One, because it could take a few years if you've messed it up to fix it. And two, it's so expensive. There are immigration lawyers that you can just use online. My organization, we generally work with low income people. So if someone makes below the poverty limit, which is about $12,000 for an individual or more if you have family members, we do the work for you for free. If you make over that, we do have a fee structure, I believe, for the citizenship application. Maybe it's $300. So it's expensive. Like this is a very expensive process for people. When they say they want to apply for citizenship and they do not know English, it is a very expensive mistake, because the citizenship application requires that you have a basic understanding of English. Your English does not need to be perfect. You are allowed to speak with an accent and not understand words and ask the tester to repeat over and over again, but you have to have a basic understanding of English. And so when we've had clients who have come to us and say, I want to apply for citizenship, I'm eligible. And I'm like, okay, for you. And they're like, well, I know it's for my dad. And so I was like, okay, can I talk to your dad? They're like, well, he doesn't speak English. You're like, oh. Yeah. Because you really know that people, if they're getting to the point where they want to apply for citizenship, it offers so much stability in their lives to know that they can't be kicked out of the United States, because once you've been offered citizenship, you are like us. You know, you might go to jail if you do something wrong, but you can't be kicked out. And until you're at that point, you never have that level of comfort to know that that's necessarily going to be the case. So your organization has been a blessing for me since I first clicked with Susan a few months ago, because I've had so many people who are like, I want to apply for citizenship soon. And I was like, God, you need to practice your English. So I really hope, and I'm sure you guys know this, but I really hope you know what a blessing you are to a lot of our clients. And really over the next few years, as you're working with them, the level of stability that you'll potentially be able to offer to them as they are working on their English and possibly up to their citizenship too. So I was talking quite a lot, and I apologize for that. I don't know what you guys are interested in. Like Susan said, I'm not an attorney. My boss is an attorney, so I can't answer specific, like, oh, one of my students is in this situation, what do you recommend? I can't do that, but I could ask my boss for advice. But if you kind of have general questions or, yeah, please stop me.
A couple questions. Let me ask you real quick, what should tutors get in terms of resource material to be able to give the students what they need to pass those tests? And where can they get things?
That's a good question. So for the citizenship test, this is through a department in the government called USCIS. This stands for the U.S. Center for Immigration Services. Now, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. I always just call it by the acronym. So USCIS is the department where they complete their applications, and this is a huge resource. And they actually have quite a decent website. So if you ever have a client who is saying they are applying for any number of anything related to immigration, you can find information on the USCIS website. When a person is applying for citizenship, you know, of course, in our government, things aren't quite as easy as we make it. So we say apply for citizenship, but it's called applying for naturalization. And the application is the N400. So if you were to go onto Google and type apply for citizenship, it will bring you up to a page about the N400 application for naturalization. On this website, there are multiple links, but one of them will talk about the English test and the civics test. There are no specific questions or answers they offer for the English test, because this test is not a specific test, Bill, maybe the way that you do it. The English test means that if you can have an interview with the agent who is interviewing you for citizenship, if you are able to pass that interview because you understand each other, then you are able to pass your English portion. So it doesn't need to be fast-paced conversational English, but it does need to be understanding basic questions and knowing how to form English responses to those questions. The civics test is much more straightforward. For this one, I believe there's like 100 to 150 questions. They post the questions and the answers. I want to say that they ask 10 questions and you need to get 6 right, or they ask 15 and you need to get 10 right. I don't remember the exact numbers now, but a person needs to study all of them because they don't know which questions they will get asked. But all of those questions and answers are posted on the USCIS website.
Are applicants required to travel anywhere, or can this all be done online or within the area in which they live?
It's done within the area that they live, but sometimes they are required to travel. So generally our clients, we see them going up to Pittsburgh or going to Washington, D.C. for their appointments.
Because I think now that I'm thinking about it, my client had said something about going to Washington, D.C. earlier this year. So maybe that was what she was referring to.
That would make sense.
Yeah, I know 2 friends from Bosnia, actually 3 of them, they had to, from Charleston, they had to go to Pittsburgh for their in-person interviews. So it probably, you know, depends where you live, and they may change those regional offices.
And that adds to the cost too, of course, because they all have what's called a biometrics interview, and then they have an actual interview. They have their test. So the biometrics interview, I believe, I want to say it's just a fingerprint. Maybe they take your photo and they run your fingerprint, but it's called the biometrics interview. And it can take the whole day because you're waiting for your name to be called to get fingerprinted.
What is the youngest age by which they can apply? Is it like 18 or?
That's a great question. I want to say it's 18 because I believe I know that there are other applications you can do when you are under 18. So if you have a family member who applies and is granted citizenship, you are under 18, it's an easier application. I think that you don't have to get tested if you are under 18 and have a parent who has been granted citizenship. So sometimes we will see clients who the parent will apply for citizenship first, so that their children don't need to go through that process. But I believe you can still apply when you're under 18, but don't quote me on that. I'm not certain, sorry.
Amy, you wanted to ask something?
My student does not have a printer. And I wondered, he thought that maybe he could print off things at Catholic Charities. Is that right?
Absolutely. I love working with John. So we do show, I guess I can tell you a little bit about, so those of you who have our clients, kind of what the services that we offer, so that you can kind of refer them back to us if they have some questions. In the first 3 months that they're in our program, we help them get, generally the goal is that we have them in safe and affordable housing, and it'll be housing that they'll be able to afford, on so generally fairly low rent. We will get them, make sure that they have a job. It may not be the job that they always dreamed of having when they first came to the United States, but it's their first job. And then we provide what's called cultural orientation. And so, Melissa, it could have been you when you were talking about the currency. So we'll talk about money and how, this is what American money is. We talk about how to use a dishwasher and washer machine, and how to ask someone for help when you're grocery shopping, or how to use a SNAP card, because generally people are eligible for SNAP benefits when they first arrive because they don't have a job yet. We'll teach them how to use public transportation in their whatever town that they're in. If there is public transportation, that's kind of the kicker. It's just a lot of American culture, but not, this is the way you need to act. It's more, these are things that we know because we've been living in this life. And for someone who's new, you don't necessarily, someone had mentioned about the street signs. We do lessons about street signs. Because you don't know when you're meant to, our crosswalks look quite different from other people's. We do lessons about personal hygiene, because the standards of personal hygiene in the US can be quite different from the standards of personal hygiene when you're living in a refugee camp. So these are in the first 3 months, we hit them hard with a lot of lessons. After that, they're in our program for 5 years, but at that point, we're generally more so just offering employment and immigration services, but anything that they need, we are there for you. So if a person needs help with transportation to get to a medical appointment, and if I'm in the town, I will be driving you. So I drive John to his doctor's appointments. So if somebody needs printing services, if they're in Morgantown, I'm happy to pick them up and bring them to my office, or have them take public transportation to my office. If they aren't, we've connected everybody with their local public libraries. But I know that during COVID, that wasn't very useful because those were some closed spaces, but generally people should know where their library is so that they know how to print, or even how to get to a CVS or an Office Max, or a place that if you have to pay for printing, we'll teach people how to get to those locations too.
Okay.
Another long-winded answer. I'm full of long-winded responses.
It's complicated stuff. There's a lot of
simple stuff that we make complicated.
I'm just still shocked at how expensive it is. I just think that's awful. It certainly limits who can apply for citizenship.
Absolutely.
Because
I know that the green card isn't cheap either. Let me see how much that is.
I'm sorry, I blocked you out there.
No, I said I know that a green card is not cheap either, but I don't remember the price of that one.
Do you know, are there any organizations that offer financial aid, not for the legal part, but just to pay those fees for people who need it?
That is a good question. Off the top of my mind, I don't know. I know that the government has a fee waiver program, and people are eligible to apply for a fee waiver. But I don't know of any programs that, I know of one program that gives grants. I have one client who is a victim of trafficking, and the program that she's in pays for her filing fees, but I don't know of any other programs that do.
Something we might be able to find out. Does anybody else have any questions? Melinda, are these answering some of your questions?
Yes, yes, I have one. I just want to be sure I understand. You're a statewide organization with staff virtually in every county, available to the refugee to kind of help them navigate their daily lives, their daily activities, kind of offer that support service?
We are a
accurate?
statewide organization, and I am the only person that does this. So what that means is during the first 3 months that a refugee arrives, I will likely be in the town that that refugee has been resettled in. Unless, and this is one of the big reasons why West Virginia kind of keeps this US tie, like I spoke about earlier, is generally when we're placing someone into the United States, they are placed in the same town as their US tie. The US tie, it doesn't have to be a citizen. It can be someone who has the green card or even someone who's applying for their green card. So I have people who are just in refugee status who don't have a green card yet who act as a US tie. So generally the US ties help provide for really a lot of the services that I would do to their friend or their family member. And oftentimes we see that the new refugee is happier to receive those services from their friend and family than from me. But let's say that I'm resettling someone in Huntington. I'm not going to be driving them to their doctor's appointments. But we do have a small amount of funding that can be used to help people get where they need to get. But generally the goal is that after 3 months of being in the United States and being in our program, you're able to be independent. So being independent means that you were able to get yourself to your work, you were able to get yourself to your doctor's appointments, your kids are in school, you know how to communicate with your school if something happens with your kids, you know what type of doctor to go to for different scenarios, and when to go to the ER versus when to schedule a PCP versus when to go to urgent care. This is really like all the information that we try to pack in, but like I said, it's a lot of information in a short period of time. So that is why the program is extended over 5 years, because when like a lifetime's worth of information is flooded at you in 3 months. And this is also the 3 months where either you are incredibly excited to be here or you're very nervous and you're very stressed and you're having really you're experiencing some major highs and major lows in your life because you're leaving your friends, you're leaving your family, you're starting the American dream and you're learning that it's not quite that dreamy because everything is so expensive here. Yeah, a person is going through a lot of highs and lows. So during the 5 years, we're able to help them kind of whatever that they need, but the goal is going to be helping them become independent. So it will be providing transportation maybe once or twice when they need it, but if they're calling for transportation again, it's going to be doing a lesson about what are some other modes to get you where you need to get.
Wow, that's an
It's
awesome
a lot of
services.
it's a lot on your plate. There's a lot of emotional and psychological support, as well as the basic tasks, basic daily living tasks.
Absolutely. I think the basic living tasks are the easy parts. And I think that really what you guys are doing is huge for our clients too, because a lot of them want to become friends with Americans, but find it hard to kind of bridge that gap. So just learning how to talk to a West Virginian and how to have conversations, whatever it may be, I think it provides them with much more confidence because we see a lot of our clients, the people that they're closest with are those that they work to, which is honestly quite similar to a lot of us. And then if they start to eventually join different groups in their communities, then they get connected that way. But a lot of times they are friends with each other, and then they are friends with some people from work, but they get work in a lot of the same places. So oftentimes they're kind of just friends with each other and with me and people from my organization. So I'm happy that they've been able to connect with you guys too and just kind of grow their American community.
I think it's just amazing everything you're trying to do. Wow. Would you just tell everybody real briefly, I thought it was so interesting when I asked you the other day how you got into this line of work.
Oh yeah, so I was telling Susan, I'm still quite new at my job. I've only been doing it about 3 months. Previously, I worked for Doctors Without Borders. I'm a civil engineer, and I hate civil engineering, but I love what I'm able to do with it. And so I would do water projects for Doctors Without Borders in refugee camps. So for 3 years, I was in Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. And my husband kind of laid down the law this spring and said, it's time to come home, Renee. Like, you have been gone for a long time. So we got a house in Morgantown. We're like trying to make life feel a bit more stable. But I knew I could not go back to doing boring civil engineering work. It was not in my heart. So I was so happy when I saw this job posted so that I'm able to continue working with refugees because it's the population I've been working with, more so providing basic life services to them now. And so it's really cool to be on this side with like be at their end goal and kind of just like be that stepping stone for them to be able to become independent and not need us at all. And just to be able to be here and feel comfortable.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak one. I'm the worst. I rely on translators. I rely on interpreters anytime I travel anywhere. So I think I can really relate to those clients that you guys have that don't speak English and rely on their children or friends or whoever to get by, because that's how I've been the last few years. And it's incredibly challenging and makes you feel really remote, even if you're not. So I'm just really happy that we were able to get connected, and I'm able to see the faces behind some of the people that my clients talk about, because I know maybe Melinda, I think maybe you were working with Hydri, is that correct?
Yes.
And so really, yeah, like he's told me that he has a tutor and he's going to be applying for citizenship and he's so excited. So like really when I connect with our clients and they talk about you guys, it makes me smile. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming and talking with us tonight. Is it all right if I give people your email address, or would you rather they go through me?
Oh, no, please give my email.
Okay. And I'll give everybody each other's emails. We were going to do that the last time and it just got lost in the shuffle, but we'll do that.
Susan?
Yes, Bill.
Was this recorded?
Yes.
Right. Renee? Okay.
And you might be getting a new client from us soon. We have a refugee arriving. He's meant to touch down in about 30 minutes in Clarksburg.
Yay!
So we have a new person coming from Uganda. Will be resettled in Morgantown. I don't know his English level yet or what his goals are, so I'm sure he'll be connected to y'all quite soon.
And we have the new woman from Vietnam to work on.
Great.
And that's
right, Bill?
Maybe do sign language someday.
Yeah.
maybe a Google Translator or some.
I rely on that.
some way.
She may speak French, and we have a few French speakers around,
We'll
depending how old she is.
we'll make it happen somehow.
Well, thank you, Renee, very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Really, please feel free to reach out to me. If you have clients who are not one of our, or if you have students who are not one of our clients, but they have immigration questions, please feel free to reach out to me too, and I can connect them to our attorney. Generally what we do, just so you guys know, is if someone has immigration questions, like I want to apply for this, or I don't know if I'm eligible, I'll talk to them on the phone for about 15 minutes just to find out more about their immigration history. I give that information to our attorney. She does a bit of research about their potential case, and then we'll get back to them. Sometimes I will do these conversations through translators or through their teachers or through their friends, whoever is able to communicate in English enough about their potential case. So really, please feel free to refer anybody to us. A referral is completely free, just to find out if they're even eligible for whatever they're hoping for. Like, we're able to provide that for free. So please use us, because I'm definitely using y'all.
All right.
Okay, I will hop off now. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Renee, very much.
Thank you, BA.
You're welcome.
Thank
That
you.
was very
Thank you.
informative.
Yes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
She is a very interesting, neat young woman.
Yes, she is. She has a plate full.
Yes.
Is
I
she
know
West
when she
Virginia
said-
native, Susan?
Yeah, what?
Is she a West Virginia native?
I don't know. I really don't know. I found that out about her working with Doctors Without Borders, and I thought that was fascinating. And I found that out the other day. That's the first time she and I asked her how she got to West Virginia. And she came here because of her husband. I don't know if, I said, how'd you get to Morgantown? And I don't know if he is connected with the university or one of the hospitals or what. Next time I talk to her, I'll ask her that. Because I'm always curious, how did you get to West Virginia?
Well, that was very, very, very good program, Susan. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah,
Thank
she's
you.
wonderful. Well, thank you all for everything you do, always.
I know I might send her an email and tell her that we have some places in West Virginia that need water and sewer, and her experience might be useful. I could hook her up with somebody, but
Yeah, Amy, you two could really connect
I
here.
know.
Amy was in water. That was her specialty, was clean water.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I can see lots of ways where we're going to work with Renee. And like she said, she has somebody coming in 30 minutes. And she gave me 2 students the other day, 2 more that we haven't matched yet. Bill, I hope you're going away for the weekend and going to get a good rest.
Well, I am, but I want to mention, I want to let you know that I got Samir's return envelope today.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So that one will be coming very soon.
Okay, well, just let me
By the
know.
way, while we still have a couple tutors with us here, in listening to them talk, I was wondering if those evaluations of quote unquote might be even more helpful if we actually included a copy of the specific items on the best test, that instead of just in kind of generic summary, general descriptors of a person who may score in a particular range, actually let them see the specific items on the test that the student did well on or did not do on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think it might be more helpful.
You know what I thought, Bill? I was talking to Helen today, And I was going to ask you and Helen to be on, we do this once a month with the tutors. And I was going to ask you and Helen to be on next month and to talk with them about the evaluations and the tests. And you can explain to them what you do and then ask them what would be helpful. Because Helen was asking if any of the information was useful. So I thought that might be a really good program. Would that work?
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
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 BA.
Yeah.
Thanks at the beginning.